let's be honest. Nobody warns you that success comes with funerals. Not the kind with flowers and black clothes, but the kind where you quietly bury versions of yourself. And sometimes, back, the people who can't come with you. Growth doesn't just change your life, it rearranges your circle. And the scariest part, back, the first ones to leave are often the ones you love most. A growth is not the glamorous transformation people imagine when they picture success. It's not the movie montage with upbeat music and a perfect ending. It's often lonely, confusing, and filled with moments that feel like loss instead of progress. When you start to evolve, you start to notice that the conversations that once energized you now drain you. The people who used to feel like home suddenly feel like history. It's not because you've stopped caring about them. It's because you've stopped being the version of yourself that fit comfortably beside them. Growth quietly separates you from what no longer aligns. And it does so without asking for permission. It doesn't announce itself. It just happens in the spaces between who you were and who you're becoming. When people talk about leaving others behind, it sounds intentional, like you made a conscious decision to walk away. But that's not how it really feels. Most of the time, you're just trying to figure out why things that used to make sense suddenly don't anymore. You're still showing up, but something's different. You start to crave depth over distraction, purpose over comfort, clarity over chaos. And the people who loved your old rhythm might feel rejected when you change the beat. They might say you've changed and they'll be right, get back. But what they won't see is that you didn't change to leave them, you changed to find yourself. And that's a process few people understand until they go through it themselves. The hardest part about growth is realizing how much of our identity was built in relationship to other people. We often become mirrors for the circles we move in, reflecting their opinions, their habits, their pace. So when you start to grow, you're not just stepping into a new chapter, you're breaking away from a shared narrative. That's why it feels so heavy. You're rewriting the story that connected you. And while that new story may be more honest, it also creates distance from the old characters. It's not betrayal, it's evolution. But evolution doesn't comfort the ones who prefer consistency. They love the version of you that didn't question things. And now you're asking questions that challenge their comfort. That's when love and familiarity start to pull in opposite directions. People rarely talk about how threatening growth can look from the outside. When you start making better choices, it can feel like rejection to those still choosing differently. When you stop gossiping, you seem distant. When you start working out, you seem obsessed. When you start protecting your energy, you seem selfish. Every boundary you set can feel like a wall to someone who benefited from your openness. But growth isn't about proving anything. It's about preserving what matters. It's about realizing that peace has a price, and often that price is approval. Take it back. You can't become who you need to be while constantly apologizing for it. And sometimes the people who once clapped for you stop clapping because your light reminds them of their own dim potential. You begin to understand that love doesn't always mean longevity. Some people are meant to be lessons, not lifetimes. And that realization hurts because your heart doesn't know how to let go of someone who once made it feel full. But growth teaches you that not every connection is supposed to last forever. Some are only meant to help you see the next step back. The challenge is not to close your heart when they leave. The challenge is to love them for who they were to you, even as you release who they no longer are. You start to learn that letting go isn't about erasing memories. It's about accepting that some chapters were meant to end so the story could move forward. As you evolve, you notice that your tolerance changes. The conversations that used to entertain you start to feel shallow. The drama that once hooked you now feels like noise. You begin to crave peace more than attention, solitude more than social validation. That's when growth starts to isolate you, not because people pushed you away, but because silence becomes your teacher. You begin to value time differently. You stop wasting it trying to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You realize that validation used to be your fuel, and now authenticity is. Growth doesn't ask for applause. It just demands honesty, and honesty often costs you relationships that were built on illusion. You can't stay loyal to your old self and your future self at the same time. One of them has to go. That's the tension that makes growth feel like loss. You're torn between gratitude for the past and commitment to the future. The people around you might not understand why you're no longer available in the same way, why you're less reactive, less involved, less dependent. They interpret your detachment as coldness when, in reality, it's focus. You're not running away from anyone. You're running toward alignment. But alignment has a side effect. It filters your life. The more you align with your values, the fewer people fit inside your circle. That's not ego. It's evolution doing its quiet work. There comes a point where you stop trying to convince others that your growth is valid. You realize that not everyone deserves access to your process. Growth isn't something you perform for others. It's something you live through. You learn to stop oversharing, stop seeking agreement, and stop explaining your reasons. The people who are meant to stay will stay without needing a briefing. The rest will drift away and you'll feel the ache of their absence, but also the relief of authenticity. You'll begin to see that peace doesn't always feel peaceful at first. Sometimes it feels like emptiness. But that emptiness is just the space where new alignment begins to take root. Back. There's a specific loneliness that comes with self-improvement, the kind that makes you question whether it's worth it. You start to wonder if being understood is more important than being fulfilled. But over time, back, you'll see that the loneliness fades into clarity. You stop needing to be surrounded to feel secure. You stop needing agreement to feel certain. You start realizing that you can love people deeply and still outgrow the way you relate to them. Growth is never about superiority, it's about responsibility. Back. The responsibility to stop betraying yourself just to be accepted. And once you embrace that, you stop fearing the distance between you and others because you finally feel close to yourself. Back. Every version of growth costs you something familiar. Sometimes it's comfort, sometimes it's connection, sometimes it's community. It back. But what you gain is integrity, an unshakable sense that you are no longer living on autopilot. You start to recognize that love and growth can coexist, but they don't always look the way you imagined. You learn to hold gratitude for what was while standing fully in what is. You stop trying to drag everyone with you, understanding that real elevation is silent, selective, and sacred. And even though it feels like loss, back. It's actually liberation, the shedding of everything that cannot breathe at your new altitude. We often assume that the people who love us will automatically understand the changes we make in our lives. Back. It feels like a reasonable expectation, but growth has a way of disrupting the dynamics that made relationships feel stable. When you start to grow, you stop reacting the way you used to. You become more intentional, back. More selective with your time and more protective of your energy. The version of you that used to say yes to everything starts learning how to say no without guilt. And that no changes the rhythm of the relationship. The people who once found comfort in your predictability might now feel confused by your boundaries. They think you're pulling away when, in truth, you're pulling inward. That growth doesn't always come wrapped in applause. It often arrives wrapped in misunderstanding. When you start evolving, your priorities shift in ways that not everyone can relate to. You begin valuing peace over drama. Back. Self-discipline over distraction, purpose over popularity. The people around you who haven't made that shift yet may start interpreting your choices as judgment. They might say you've changed it back, and they'll be right, but they'll mean it like an accusation instead of a compliment. You stop attending every event, you talk less about trivial things, and suddenly you seem distant. It back. What they don't see is that you're not disappearing, you're recentering, you're choosing to direct your energy towards something that builds you, not something that drains you. It's not personal, back, but it feels personal to those who were comfortable with your old patterns. Growth exposes the invisible contracts that once held relationships together. Maybe your bond was built on shared frustration, shared fear, back, or shared limitation. When you start healing or setting boundaries, you unknowingly break that contract. You stop participating in behaviors that once felt normal, but are now misaligned with who you're becoming. It back. And people rarely respond calmly when you stop playing the role they're used to. They might call you arrogant, distant, or self-centered. Back. But what's really happening is that you're no longer validating their comfort zone. You've shifted from being who others needed you to be being who you actually are. That shift doesn't always bring applause. It often brings resistance. The truth is, most people don't fear your growth. They fear what your growth reflects back at them. Back, your progress becomes a mirror that forces them to look at their own stagnation. When you start changing your habits, setting goals, or taking risks, it can highlight the places where others have settled. It back. That reflection is uncomfortable, so instead of facing it, they project it. They tell you that you're different or that you've forgotten where you came from. Back. But you haven't forgotten, you've just decided not to live there anymore. And while it's tempting to shrink yourself to make them feel safe, doing so keeps both of you stuck. Back, you can love people deeply and still refuse to dim your light to match their comfort level. What makes this kind of loss so painful is that love doesn't disappear when alignment does. It back. You can still care about someone even as the distance between you grows. That's why growth can feel confusing. You're grieving something that technically still exists. You see them, you talk to them, back. But the connection feels different. The conversations don't hit the same depth. The laughter feels slightly forced, and you start noticing that you're speaking two different emotional languages. It back. They want the old version of you back, the one who didn't challenge the status quo, the one who tolerated what no longer feels right. But you can't unlearn self-awareness once it's been earned. Back. You can only choose whether to honor it or suppress it. The idea that love means always staying connected is one of the biggest lies we've been told. Real love isn't about proximity, it's about presence. Some people can be right beside you and still not see you. Others can be far away, but deeply understand your soul. Growth often reveals which is which. When you start changing, back. You learn that understanding isn't guaranteed, even from those closest to you. Some will celebrate your evolution, others will question it, and a few will quietly resent it. Back. And none of that makes them bad. It just means their awareness hasn't expanded yet. Compassion becomes essential here, because growth without compassion turns into ego. It back. You learn to love people even when they can't meet you where you are. Part of maturity is realizing that not everyone is meant to grow with you, and that doesn't make them wrong. People evolve at their own pace. back in their own way and for their own reasons. The same lessons that woke you up might not resonate with them yet. You can't force awareness on someone who isn't ready to receive it back. Trying to pull them forward only creates friction and resentment. So instead of forcing understanding, you start practicing acceptance. You love them for who they are without needing them to mirror your evolution. That kind of acceptance takes strength because it means choosing peace over control. It means recognizing that growth isn't about dragging others along. It's about walking your path with integrity. Sometimes, the people you love will interpret your boundaries as rejection. They'll think your silence means indifference when really it's a form of respect for both of you. You're giving them the freedom to stay where they are without judgment while giving yourself permission to keep moving. Take it back. That balance is hard to maintain because it doesn't look like the kind of love we're taught to value. We're taught that love means closeness, but sometimes love means space. It means saying, I care about you, but I can't stay at this level anymore. That statement isn't cruel. It's courageous. It takes maturity to love someone without needing to stay entangled in their version of comfort. The deeper you go into your growth journey, the more you realize that relationships built on shared wounds rarely survive shared healing. When you heal, the bond that once felt unbreakable starts to listen. You begin to see how much of that connection was rooted in mutual struggle rather than mutual vision. Healing shifts your energy, your standards, and your language, and sometimes that shift becomes a silent goodbye. You stop relating through pain and start relating through purpose, and not everyone is ready for that transition. You grieve it, you miss it, but you also understand it. Because to keep that bond alive would mean betraying the progress you fought so hard to achieve. Over time, you stop seeing misunderstanding as rejection and start seeing it as redirection. You learn to hold space for people who don't get it yet, while not shrinking yourself for their comfort. Growth teaches you to stop chasing understanding and start embodying it. You realize that every person who fails to understand you gives you another chance to understand yourself better. You start recognizing that losing understanding from others isn't a sign that you're on the wrong path. It's proof that you're finally walking your own. And though it feels like loss, it's really clarity, the kind that only comes when you choose alignment over approval and authenticity over attachment. Nobody talks about how lonely it feels to grow. Everyone glorifies transformation as if it's a beautiful awakening, but in reality, it often feels like breaking apart. You start shedding pieces of yourself that once felt permanent, and it feels like losing someone you knew intimately, because you are. Growth requires grieving the version of you that once fit perfectly into the world you've now outgrown. It's a strange kind of mourning, one that doesn't get sympathy because people see progress, not loss. But behind every milestone, there's a quiet goodbye to who you used to be. You miss your old habits, even the unhealthy ones, because they once kept you safe. You miss your old mindset because it was familiar. You miss your old environment because it felt like belonging, even if it wasn't alignment. Grieving your past self is one of the most painful parts of growth because you start realizing how much of that identity was built on survival. The version of you that smiled through discomfort, stayed silent to avoid conflict, or settled to feel accepted. It wasn't weak, it was necessary. That version of you did what it needed to do to get here. But when growth enters the picture, survival is no longer enough. You crave authenticity. You start craving depth, boundaries, and truth, and suddenly the habits that once protected you begin to suffocate you. You can feel yourself outgrowing the behaviors that used to make you feel strong, and that's terrifying because it leaves you exposed. You begin to see how much of your identity was shaped by fear, and letting that go feels like losing control. You begin to understand that growth isn't just about addition, it's about subtraction. You don't just gain clarity, you lose confusion. You don't just gain peace, you lose chaos. You don't just gain confidence, you lose validation from others. It's not the kind of loss people notice from the outside, but you feel it deeply on the inside. You're no longer operating from the same frequency, and that means you start noticing disconnection in places that used to feel like home. It's jarring to realize that what once felt right now feels wrong. Not because it changed, but because you did. You can't unknow what you've learned, and you can't go back to pretending you don't know it. Growth closes doors that comfort used to hold open, and it demands you walk away before you feel ready. There's a quiet sadness in recognizing your old self in the people you used to relate to. You see them making the same excuses you once made, settling for the same patterns you once tolerated, and you want to help, but you can't. Because growth isn't something you can hand someone, it's something they have to earn through their own discomfort. Watching others stay where you've already broken free from is a bittersweet reminder of how far you've come. It's also a test of compassion because the same ignorance that now frustrates you once protected you too. You begin to soften your judgment, realizing that everyone's evolution unfolds on its own timeline. That realization humbles you. It makes you grateful for the pain that pushed you forward. Even when you didn't understand why it had to hurt so much, every stage of growth comes with a new layer of loss. You lose the need to explain yourself, the desire to be liked by everyone, and the compulsion to prove your worth. You start seeing how much of your energy was wasted trying to belong in spaces that didn't align with your values. Take it back. The people who once validated you no longer feel like your tribe, and that emptiness is confusing. It's like standing between two worlds, no longer comfortable in the old one, but not yet grounded in the new one. Back, you start questioning everything, your friendships, your goals, your purpose. It feels like chaos, but that chaos is the clearing before expansion. It back, you can't rebuild your foundation until you've torn down the walls that kept you contained. At some point, you realize that healing and loss are intertwined. Every time you grow, you let go of something, a belief, a fear, a relationship, and identity. It's a cycle that repeats with every new level of awareness. You grieve, you release, and you rebuild. And every time you do, you become a little freer, but also a little lonelier. Because the higher your awareness climbs, the fewer people understand your perspective. You start craving connections that don't require translation, people who meet you with presence instead of projection. Until then, solitude becomes your sanctuary. It stops feeling like isolation and starts feeling like peace. The silence that once scared you begins to sound like truth. Back, there's something deeply emotional about realizing how much of your old self was built for other people. The way you spoke, dressed, thought, even dreamed. It was shaped by the expectations of those around you. Growth dismantles that illusion. It forces you to strip away everything that was performative until all that's left is what's real. And what's real doesn't always feel comfortable at first. You might feel raw, back, exposed, uncertain, but that discomfort is a sign of rebirth, not regression. You're learning to meet yourself again without all the layers. You're learning to recognize your own voice beneath the noise of others. Back. And once you do, it's impossible to go back to pretending you don't hear it. The grief of growth doesn't come all at once. It hits in waves. You'll think you've moved on from your old self, hit back, and then something will trigger a memory that brings the achy right back. It might be a place, a song, a conversation. Suddenly, you're flooded with nostalgia for the version of you who didn't know better. Back. The one who loved without boundaries, trusted too easily, or ignored their intuition. You miss their innocence even if it came with ignorance. Back. You realize that every version of you was doing their best with the tools they had. And that realization turns grief into gratitude. Back. You stop resenting your past self for not knowing more and start thanking them for surviving long enough to give you the chance to grow. Back. Growth also teaches you that you don't have to despise the old you to evolve beyond them. You can honor who you were while choosing to be someone different. You can love the one who tolerated too much, back, who stayed too long, who doubted their worth. Because without that version, there would be no transformation. You start understanding that self-compassion is what turns growth from punishment into progress. You stop shaming yourself for who you used to be and start celebrating how far you've come. You begin to see your old self not as a mistake, but as a foundation. A necessary chapter in the story of becoming. Take it back. And while you may outgrow that chapter, it will always hold meaning. The deeper you grow, the more you realize that grief is not the opposite of growth. It's the evidence of it. Back. You can't evolve without leaving behind versions of yourself that once felt like home. You can't expand without breaking the comfort that kept you small. The sadness that comes with growth isn't weakness. Back, it's awareness. It's the heart recognizing that change, even when chosen, still costs something. You learn to carry that grief with grace, to let it soften you instead of harden you. Because every loss inside growth isn't just an ending, it's a clearing. And in that clearing, you meet yourself again wiser, lighter, and more aligned than before. Back, letting go is one of the hardest lessons growth will ever teach you. We live in a world that glorifies holding on to relationships, memories, identities, even pain. We're told that love means staying back no matter what, but growth challenges that narrative. It asks you to love people enough to let them go when staying starts to cost you your peace. That's not coldness, that's maturity. Back. Letting go doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means you've stopped clinging to what no longer fits your evolution. You can still have deep gratitude for someone and know they no longer belong in your present. Back. Love doesn't always need to end with bitterness or blame. It can end with grace. But grace takes strength, and strength takes heartbreak. That's the emotional tax of growth. It back. There's a misconception that walking away means giving up, but often it's the opposite. Walking away can be the most courageous act of self-respect you'll ever perform. It's choosing alignment over attachment, peace over familiarity, truth over illusion. People might not understand that kind of strength because society confuses endurance with loyalty. You're expected to keep showing up even when it hurts, as if love is proven by your capacity to tolerate pain. But love that constantly asks you to abandon yourself isn't love, it's dependency. Growth requires you to separate the two. Get back. It demands that you prioritize your well-being even if it means disappointing others. And in doing so, you learn that leaving doesn't mean you stopped loving. It means you finally started loving yourself too. Back. The hardest part about letting go is that love doesn't vanish just because a chapter ends. You can still love someone deeply and recognize that your paths no longer align. You can care about them, miss them, back, even wish things could be different, but still choose distance. That kind of maturity is uncomfortable because it contradicts our instincts. Our hearts want to fix, to stay, to hope, back. But growth isn't about erasing emotion. It's about managing it with wisdom. It's about learning to hold love without possession, To accept connection without expectation. Back, you realize that love isn't always meant to last, it's meant to teach. And when the lesson is complete, clinging only turns love into suffering. Letting go becomes an act of respect for them and for yourself. Back, as you evolve, you start seeing love differently. You stop seeing it as something that demands closeness and start seeing it as something that demands freedom. Real love is expansive, not restrictive. Hit back. It doesn't seek to own or control. It seeks to understand and release. When you reach this understanding, you start loving people for who they are, not for how they make you feel. You stop trying to mold them into versions that fit your narrative. That shift is liberating, but it's also lonely because it means you can love someone and still walk away when growth takes you in opposite directions. Back. The depth of that love isn't measured by how long it lasted, but by how honestly it was lived. And sometimes the truest love is the one that lets go without resentment. Letting go often looks like silence. Back, there's no dramatic ending, no confrontation, no final goodbye, just a quiet acceptance that the season has passed. You find yourself reminiscing not with anger, but with tenderness. Back. The memories that once hurt begin to soften. You stop replaying what went wrong and start appreciating what was right. You understand that not everything beautiful is meant to last forever. Back. Some things are meant to change you and leave. And that's okay. The love that helped you grow doesn't need to stay to remain meaningful. You carry it with you not as a wound, but as wisdom. Back. That's what it means to outgrow someone without bitterness. To remember them with love, even as you move on without them. Back. Growth teaches you that closure doesn't always come from a conversation. It comes from acceptance. You stop waiting for apologies that may never come. Hit back. You stop explaining your side to people committed to misunderstanding it. You realize that peace isn't found in someone else's validation. It's found in your ability to release what you can't control. Hit back. That's a hard pill to swallow, especially when your heart still aches for understanding. But you learn that closure isn't something you're given. It's something you create. Hit back. You create it every time you choose inner calm over external chaos. You create it every time you forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. You create it every time you let love go without letting it make you bitter. Letting go doesn't make you heartless. It makes you human. It's a reminder that love and loss coexist. Back. You can have compassion for someone's pain while still protecting your own boundaries. You can wish them well without wishing them back. You can honor the role they played in your story while still writing the next chapter alone. It's the duality of love, the ability to feel gratitude and grief at the same time. Back. Most people think strength is moving on quickly, but real strength is moving on slowly and consciously. It's allowing yourself to feel every emotion without letting those emotions dictate your direction. You learn to release with love, not resistance, and that's where true emotional maturity begins to take shape. The beauty of letting go is that it creates space for new experiences, new people, back, new versions of yourself. When your hands are full of what's gone, there's no room for what's next. That's why growth demands surrender. It requires trust that what's meant for you won't need force. Back, trust that endings are not punishments, but preparation. You begin to see life less as a series of losses and more as a flow of transitions. Each goodbye becomes a gateway, each closure a clearing. Back, you start recognizing that love doesn't end when it changes form. It transforms from connection to memory, from presence to influence, from closeness to wisdom. And in that transformation, back, you find peace in knowing that nothing truly loved is ever lost. It's simply carried differently. As you learn to release, you start living with a lighter heart. You no longer carry people like burdens. Back, you carry them like lessons. You stop chasing closure from others because you've learned to create it within. You stop resisting change because you trust your capacity to rebuild. Back. You stop fearing endings because you've lived through enough of them to know they always lead somewhere better. That's the quiet confidence growth gives you. The knowing that letting go doesn't mean losing everything. It means clearing the space to receive something more aligned, more peaceful, and more true. Back. And the more you practice that, the less afraid you become of change because you've learned that everything you release is replaced with something wiser. Letting go is not a weakness. It's a declaration of faith. It's believing that love doesn't die just because it changes shape. It's trusting that the people meant to walk with you will match your pace, and those who fall behind are still part of your story, just in a different whack. It's understanding that growth will always cost you something, but the trade-off is freedom. You become lighter, softer, wiser. You stop fighting the natural rhythm of life, the ebb and flow of connection and separation. Back. You stop fearing the distance between you and others because you've learned that what's meant for you will always remain within reach. And in that surrender, you finally find peace, not in holding on tighter, back, but in letting go with love.